Okay, thank you very much for coming today for this symposium and also attending the panel discussion. And I'm so glad to be given this role of chair. I said as a journalist, but I've never have received the training as a journalist, but I will try my best today. So today symposium is really relevant. It came from the different presentation about the issue of poverty and also food security, which is very a big concern actually in developing countries, especially in Africa. And but we cannot just remain close our hand, and that's why research is trying to address the different issues and then to improve the food system. And according to your different presentation, I think all of you are trying to tackle the issue from your different background, from your different specialty. And one common key word that came in the presentation is about international or interdisciplinary collaboration. I think this is a very good keyword from which I would like to start my first question. And I would like to hear your opinion about how international interdisciplinary collaboration could help to improve like the food system in Africa. So I will go from one by one, especially maybe the last presenter, Dr. Nakamura, he talk about for Terra, interdisciplinary collaboration is important to address the issue. So I would like to hear from your perspective, which specific discipline do you think are critical to improve like food system in Africa, especially going through the topic of like soil health, how international interdisciplinary collaboration can address this issue.
Okay, thank you, Papa. In our project, we are working on the several disciplines. Of course, the soil health we are talking about, so mainly the soil science is one of the measures. But in our project, we are working with the weed science, crop science, and the animal science, and also the agricultural engineering. But beyond that, we want to have expertise that the environmental science to evaluate the impact of our developed technology to the wider environment. It's okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think you have different specialists in the Terra Africa. Some people are working on soil science, others are addressing the soil microbiology. You have like the livestock. And I think this integration is important if you want to reach like a good soil health improvement. And coming to building to your response, I would also want to ask Dr. Fowler, from your very rich background and experience, what else can you add as a strategy to improve like interdisciplinary collaboration to foster like a food system?
Well, I'm personally and painfully aware that that there's really no major problem in the world that can be understood or solved within the confines of a single academic discipline. We go to universities, we study soil science or crop science or economics or international relations or sociology, but really to understand and to begin to deal with problems that confront humanity today, we have to treat those academic disciplines as if they have borders that are in invisible ink. We have to cross those borders to really begin to understand. And I will say, from my own experience, I spent, as you saw from the introduction, a lot of my life working on the issue of crop genetic diversity. That's a fairly specialized field. And it wasn't really until the last couple of years, I have to admit, that I became aware that no, that has to be joined with considerations about soil. And I've got to understand climate change better than I did before, and a number of other things, because the solutions lie in joining together the different disciplines. They don't lie being imprisoned in a particular discipline. And that's, I think, the challenge for us as individuals to see the connections with other academic disciplines. And I think it's also the challenge for us as governments, because we've organized ourselves into ministries of agriculture and within ministries of agriculture, departments of soil science and crop science. And then we have the ministries of foreign affairs and treasury and environment, as if all of these things are separate and not connected, when in fact they are connected. I think the challenge of leadership today is the challenge of breaking down those barriers and looking for really practical and concrete ways to bring those researchers, those actors in the system together, because I think it's only when they actually sit down together and work together that we get the kind of creative responses that, that we require.
Thank you very much for your clear explanation. And maybe I would follow up with Iseki, Dr. Iseki. In your collaboration in West Africa, do you also come across like how to address interdisciplinary collaboration for especially the work you are doing in cowpea production in West Africa?
You said about the strategy of disciplinary approach, interdisciplinary approach. Yeah, there's no strategy. Just important is each scientist have to pay attention out of their research interest. For example, our project, there is several researchers with different disciplines, but they concentrate only their own research interest. There's no synergy. That is a problem. That's normally, yes.
I like
Sorry.
that. I like
For
your
example, you are the soil microbiologist, but have you ever seen about the effect of different plant genetics? For example, the effect of varieties, and how is your research output contribute to the plant breeding?
Yeah.
Maybe there is a very little attention because that is out of your research interest. But if you seriously advance the interdisciplinary approach, you have to pay attention, not only you, including me, all the scientists, each scientist have to pay attention out of the research interest, because the objective is the same, the goal is the same, to improve the food production to meet the future climate change. Yes, that is the only,
Yeah.
I think.
Thank you for your question. She's very, I like the answer. Yeah, I know. We are like, I think your answer is very positive for me, because we are sometimes working differently in your field. And that's why if you have a project with different people inside, it's good to have like good communication. Like if you have like different cowpea varieties that you have developed, and me as a soil microbiologist, I could try to see how those varieties impact the soil health. And then you can come up with like more positive. So integration and close communication among researchers, I think, is important. Thank you very much. And I will follow up with Professor Alex. We are talking about research, especially in Africa, but we know that research always comes with a lot of challenges. And you are working in different African countries. So I would like to know whether in the field of NUS, like neglected underutilized species, whether you have like any come up with any challenge, like especially farmers having some challenge to access the NUS, and how do you think you can try to help for them to have like a better access or a better understanding on those NUS?
Okay, so I would like to change a little bit the question.
Okay,
If
thank
we
you.
just see the farmers is just one part of the value chain. So the moment that you focus on farmers, just on farmers, it creates a lot of different problems, because, okay, they're going to be producing maybe at higher yields or at better capacity or with better practices, certain NUS, fine. But if there is no mature value chain, where are they going to send it? So it is much more important to just see the production as one part of the value chain. And this is a very, very important step. I mentioned in my presentation issues related to urban markets. Unless a lot of the NUS, I do not say that every NUS is capable for being upscaled, but a lot of them have the potential. Unless you try to leverage the value chain, to strengthen the value chain, these crops are doomed to just be locally consumed, locally produced on very specific times of the year and being like a secondary source for the household. So it's much more important to think, okay, who are going to be the ultimate consumers of these crops beyond the local areas? And this is where I was mentioning the importance of urban consumers. A lot of the urban consumers in African cities are relying increasingly in cheap and unhealthy imported food products. So it is a very important element to educate urban consumers how to move away from these unhealthy, of course cheap, but unhealthy, possibly unsustainable food products to locally produced neglected and underutilized crops. Very important is, for example, to educate beyond, to take away the stigma of a lot of these crops as crops for the poor. A lot of these crops are very healthy, are very sustainable. Okay, so it is important to educate consumers. So what we are doing in this project, we try to create recipe books. So in order to show how can you use, as an urban consumer, these crops into recipes that are locally available, nutritious, and can bring diversity in your diet. That goes well beyond the producers, because yes, you can give whatever incentive to the producers, but if nobody is buying these crops, they are doomed to remain obscure, is not the right word, but not applicable to a wider population. So this is one of the things that we are looking at. And however, again, we have to be very, very careful to leverage the value chains in a sustainable manner. A lot of these crops, especially wild ones, might be prone to overexploitation. If there is a boom, if they're considered the next hot superfood, for whatever reason, you are running all sorts of other problems in relation to overexploitation, environmental degradation, loss of agricultural biodiversity from exactly the other side. You try to leverage their importance in the value chain, but you do it in a very uncoordinated fashion. So I think we need to move well beyond just the small scale producers to see it holistically as crops with important position for local diets, regional diets. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is a very nice, clear explanation. So I move to the next question. And the next question comes to like in the world, we are like using a lot of chemicals like to quickly increase production. I think that is the easiest way if you have the means to buy fertilizer. But in Africa, I think the access to fertilizer is a bit complicated because it's expensive and sometimes small scale farmers do not have access to that. So my question is, how do you think like we can try to balance like improved agricultural production at the same time protecting the environment? And especially in Terra Africa, I think you are trying to develop different strategies. How do you think you can improve agricultural production at the same time saving the environment? So Dr. Nakamura, if you have something to.
Okay, thank you very much. Our project are doing the investigation about the various cropping systems and also utilization of the locally available resources, especially for the organic resources, to enhance the crop yield for all of the agricultural options. And I think that this kind of the management can increase the crop yield, and not only for the crop yield enhancement, but if we can have the good yield in the, how can I say, the one field, that can prevent to start the cultivate new field. That can also prevent the how can I say, kind of the biodiversity. And also we are doing the experiment about agroecological practice, like the rotations or intercropping or some other systems. That can, we are thinking that this kind of the mixed croppings or some other activity can improve the soil biodiversity, it can help to enhance the soil health. But in Africa, I want to say that we should not say use the chemicals for farmers, because they are using the chemicals to increase the crop yield. If we say the chemical is not good for soil health, maybe that is good for the scientists or politicians, but that is not good for farmers because they don't know how to manage without any chemicals. That's why I think that we need to make a good balance using some agroecological practice and local available materials to reduce this kind of the chemical impact on the agricultural
Thank you.
environment.
Yeah, thank you very much. So maybe I would ask Dr. Iseki again, if you have any addition about this topic in West Africa,
Crop diversity.
and also the use of chemical
Yeah.
or organic.
Okay. So normally the smallholder farmers, not only the Africa, but all the smallholder farmers have, they use several crops and also several varieties to mitigate the effect of climate because they have long experience to cultivate in their place. But the current situation of climate change and also future, the effect of a normal climate event is more frequent and also the severity is increasing. So their traditional knowledge is no longer addressing to the new situations. So that's why I'm developing the advisory system depending on the climate projections. And also the materials, they already have several materials to mitigate the risk. But the material also should be renewal to the new set, more adaptable to the new climate situations.
Thank you very much. So I will end that set of questions and move to another one, especially about the crop diversification and then the genetic resources that were introduced by Dr. Fowler. We know that we are trying our best to improve like soil health and also like crop resources, but it is very important to have also diversified genetic resources. And if we lose that, I think this is going to affect like the food system in the future. So maybe you have addressed that in your presentation, but I would like to ask you again, what prompted you to start the VAC in your journey, and also so far what VAC has achieved until now?
You know, I think one thing that I've realized in the last couple of years is sometimes the change of just one word makes you see the world a little bit differently. I think people in my generation have been talking about food security, and food security meant to them increasing production of maize, rice, wheat, soybeans, and that was necessary. There was a calorie deficiency in many developing countries. But what if instead of talking about food security, which I think led us in that direction, we had talked about nutrition security? That would have been a different way of thinking, I believe. It's been a different way for me to think about it in recent years, because nutrition security is not produced by rice, maize, wheat, soybeans, not entirely. It's produced by a much more diverse system, which includes those crops, but doesn't exclude the others. And so I think in the future, if we were to see what we're trying to aim for as nutrition security, then we would be looking for the proper balance among the different crops, and we'd be looking at diverse crops. We'd be looking at micronutrients and micronutrient deficiencies and the effect of those on human health. And we would be trying to, if we were going to try to create good nutrition security by 2050, we'd be working backwards from there and saying, what do we need to do now to create nutrition security in 2050? And I think maybe this is an answer to your question, maybe it's not. Then I think we would be concentrating on a broad range of crops, and we would be looking at their effects on soil. And we would be trying to ensure that our agricultural systems are systems that promote human health and environmental health. And I think that's a little bit different way of thinking than, honestly, I was thinking about it 20 years ago.
Thank you. You can keep the mic. I'm going to ask you another question. So I want to know also your opinion about the role of crop diversification into mitigating climate change. We talk about climate change briefly in the different slide, but how crop diversification could help also trying to mitigate the effect of climate change, if you can give us some opinion.
I'll be quick with that one. I think crop diversification is mainly a strategy for adaptation and for nutrition security. But to the extent that it builds soils and you use legumes in systems and enrich those soils, then a couple of things happen. One is you need less nitrogen fertilizer, perhaps, or at least if you put more nitrogen on, you get even more effect from it. We know that poor soils don't use commercial fertilizers efficiently. So better soils will make more efficient use of fertilizers. I think those are things that, and because so much, I should say this, so much of fertilizer production is involved with greenhouse gas emissions. So I think diversified farming systems in the end create a healthier environment, and they create an environment that in a way almost automatically reduces emissions.
Thank you very much. So talking about crop diversification, I think I also had prepared one question to Alex. Sorry for calling you Alex. I think your name is longer than that. So the question is, if you talk about crop diversification, I think NUS are also very relevant. And I wanted to know, let me read the question as I wrote it. Since you mentioned about the climate change, no, sorry, that is for Iseki-san. So I wanted to know, could you tell us about the challenge like small scale farmers in West Africa face in promoting NUS, and probably the solution that you think can help to address that gap?
Thank you. My answer is going to be very similar like my first answer. So it is not just to see the producer itself, because it's like you are shifting the burden to somebody that is having low capacity, low resources, low ability. Instead, you need to strengthen the entire value chain. So we need to see farmers as integral parts for those NUS that have the potential to be upscaled. And this is where, again, interdisciplinarity is coming in. In our project, we had plant scientists, nutrition scientists, social scientists, because we understood from the beginning that, okay, there are 5 or 6 NUS that might be important in these areas that we are working. We do not know much about their agronomic characteristics. So we need a plant scientist in order to understand them, to create this knowledge. We do not know how these things, these crops are going to be, how it's called, behaving in accelerated climate change. For some of them, they're going to do better. Some of them are going to do worse. So it is all these things, again, for the social scientists, what is the acceptability of these crops? What kind of measures and interventions are needed? So we need to see it holistically as a value chain in order to create all sorts of interventions, in order to strengthen the value chain, educate the public, and of course, give support to the farmers. If you just see the farmers, I think, I sound very negative when I say these things. If we just see the farmers in this equation, and these farmers are poor, they try to survive every year, many of them might not be there after the next drought. You're missing the point, because they do not have on their own the power to scale up these crops. Okay, so this is why I always come back to this value chain view of neglected and underutilized crops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think we are running out of time. I had other question, but I will finish my question from now. And I would like to take maybe one question from the audience, if there is one question, one or two. I also have one question here, but first I will start from the audience, if there is anyone who would like to. Okay, so Hassan.
Congratulations to you on your the World Food Prize. So you have a lot of experience dealing with the research and then policy. So if you could go back 30 years or 40 years, and then what one decision or one aspect you would like to change, like maybe in the past that could like had more impact currently? This is for the young next generation researchers, young researchers.
You know, I'm tempted to say that people who work in the foreign ministry or the State Department, in my case, they take some pride in developing the skill to avoid questions and and answer some different question than is being posed. I think that's a hard one. I mean, for me personally, it's been quite a journey, and I think if I look at other colleagues, Masa, you and I were talking about one of them recently. I think personally, one has to just simply stay open and stay in learning mode. I think the VAX program, which we've launched in the last year and a half, is an example of that, because I will acknowledge my own shortcomings in not putting nutrition at the center and not putting soils at the center. Two major things that I'm involved in today that I was late in seeing. So I think that it's important to stay open, stay trying to learn things and trying to cross those disciplinary boundaries. From a government perspective, I think there's one thing that I come back to over and over again when I see how governments behave in international fora. I see how aid agencies operate. There's a saying that I think of virtually every day. And it was something that I saw John Hume, who won the Nobel Peace Prize many years ago for work in Northern Ireland. He said, and it was quoted in an article in the New York Times, and it just hit me. And he said, victories and solutions are not the same thing. And when I see how countries operate, even sometimes how we talk about agricultural systems and whether we are proponents of organic agriculture or regenerative agriculture, or there are all kinds of names for it. We are, and certainly how countries behave in international negotiations and such. So often it's about trying to achieve victory rather than solutions. And that means that we don't listen very carefully, and we're not trying to think creatively about what brings us together. We're just trying to beat the other side. And I just don't think that's going to work. I think we need to try a different kind of approach. And it's not easy within a government or between governments, but that's where I think the hope lies.
Thank you very much. I think we have 30 seconds left, but I will read the question from online. I'm very happy that Dr. Fowler has given the important lecture in Japan. My question is about why investment in minor opportunity crops has not progressed much. Beside the lack of knowledge about these crops, I believe that the loss of traditional food culture due to the modernization and especially in Africa, the strong stigma in these crops as food for the poor are key reasons. This negative perception has significantly hindered their wider adoption. In your opinion, what would be the most effective way to overcome this historical bias and make these opportunity crops much smarter to a broader audience, including policymakers? Yasu Morimoto, scientist in Alliance Biodiversity in Seattle, in Nairobi. ask that question to you. But I think, I don't know if you can just quickly 30 seconds or whatever, you can answer him.
I realize that there are some people who want to explain that some of the opportunity crops, the lesser crops, are that because of their social, maybe a social stigma or social standing. I want to say that I think that if we invest in those crops, if we improve production, if we, in a sense, create a modern atmosphere around them, as we have done with the major crops, then I think we remove that social barrier. I think the social barrier is very much related to the economic barriers and otherwise. I believe if you go to Africa, and I have many times, I'm told by Africans themselves that there is demand for these crops, appreciation for these crops. And let's keep in mind, these crops were domesticated in Africa, and they've been grown there for thousands of years, thousands. Obviously, they're doing something right. I think if we invest in them and show we together with Africans invest in them and show the importance of those crops, we begin to change a lot of attitudes. And I think the change in attitudes comes with change in opportunities for those crops.
Thank you very much. I think we are about to end this session. I would like to sincerely thank you coming all the way from US and also our JIRCAS scientists for your insightful presentation. If we had 1 hour, maybe 2 hours, we could continue discussing about this important topic, but we need to finish. So thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you also for attending the webinar. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。セッション3の進行は、国際農研生産環境畜産領域主任研究員のサール・パパ・サリオが担当いたしました。ファウラー博士、ガッサバラソクス先生、伊関さん、中村さん、パパさん、どうもありがとうございました。では、最後に閉会のご挨拶を、名古屋大学農学国際教育研究センターセンター長、並びに農学知的支援ネットワーク JISNAS 事務局長の江原博先生にお願いいたします。
入ってますかね。はい。皆様、2時間半にわたりましてお疲れ様でございました。閉会にあたりましてご挨拶申し上げたいと思います。今日のシンポジウムでは作物遺伝資源多様性の保全の重要性について深く学ぶ機会をいただきました。このような貴重な機会に私ども農学知的支援ネットワーク JISNAS が講演団体の一つとして加わらせていただきましたこと、誠にもってありがたくお声掛けをいただきました国際農研の皆様、関係の皆様に厚く御礼を申し上げます。そして何よりファウラー博士、そして本日ここでのご講演の皆様、それからパネリストをお務めいただいた皆様、チェアの皆様に豊かな知見を共有していただきましたこと、心より感謝申し上げます。ファウラー博士が受賞なさいます世界食糧賞、ワールドフードプライズですか。これは世界食糧デーにちなみ、食糧問題に多大な貢献をなされた人物に対して、アメリカのワールドフードプライズファンデーションが授与する賞であるということ、そしてまた1986年にノーマン・ボーローグさんによって創設されたということを承知しております。ボーローグさんは同年1986年に笹川アフリカ財団 SAA の会長にも就任されていらっしゃいます。そしてサブサハラアフリカ諸国での活動に私どもをいざなっていただいたということでございます。本日は笹川アフリカ財団の北永理事も見えていらっしゃいますけれども、私もですね、現在SAA で評議員を務めております。そういったことで、本日のですね、この特別なシンポジウムが私ども日本の農学研究者にとって、 世界食糧賞の受賞につながったお話を伺って、レジリエントな食料システム構築に資する研究の最前線に関する知識、そしてさまざまな意見をお伺いするということ、誠に大変心に残るものとなりました。本日、このようにですね、アフリカにおける適応作物や土壌研究の最新の成果と関連情報を知ることができましたこと、これは今後の強靭な食料システム構築に大いに貢献することと言えましょう。ファウラー博士の基調講演でのレジリエントな農業と食料システムに、その実現のために作物遺伝資源多様性を保存するというお話、これはもとよりですけども、本日、伊関さん、それから中村さんのご講演では、私どもが日本の作物学会や熱帯農業学会でよく存じ上げております、例えば伊関さんの学会奨励賞であったアジア・アフリカの不良環境における生産性向上に向けた植物遺伝資源の作物学的評価ですとか、中村さん、そして、お仲間の皆様の論文賞、ソイルファーティリティマネジメント・フォサステイナブル・ローランド・ライス・プロダクションといったお仕事のその後の発展、近年のですね、目覚ましいアチーブメント、これをですね、主々私ども理解を深めることができました。そしてまた、ガスパラドスさんの十分に活用されてこなかった植物種の重要性、これにつきましては、私自身、稲や麦の仕事のほかにですね、マイナーな資源植物ですとか、サゴヤシといった植物の研究をしております。こういったものにときましてはですね、まさに大きくうなずき、相槌を打ちたいというお話、これを伺えることができました。私どもJISNASでは、日本の全国のメンバー大学の皆さん、国際農研の皆様、そして、農研機構の皆様にも多大なるご尽力を賜り、この13年間、JICA の研修で、アフリカの中核農学研究者を育成するための研修事業を運営してまいりました。これまでに29カ国から123名の研修員を受け入れ、その中からは博士研究を我々のネットワークのメンバー、時には国際農研の皆様と共に取り組んだということも少なくございません。本日、この特別なシンポジウムで共有いただきました最新の情報や経験を、次からの研修やフォローアップ事業にぜひ活用させていただきたいと考えております。今回の特別なシンポジウムが国際的な協力や新しい研究の発展に向けて重要なさらなる一歩、大きなる一歩となることを確信しておりますし、本日の関係者の皆様のご努力により、この成果を世界各地に水平展開いただきますことを切に願っております。ご参加いただいた皆様も、この知見をそれぞれの現場で生かし、さらに多くの課題に取り組んでいただけることを、期待しております。本日は多くの方々に対面で、そしてオンラインでご参集をいただきまして、熱心に耳を傾けていただき、そしてまた、意見交換といいましょうか、さまざまな意見を引き出してですね、私どもに共有させていただきましたことを、誠にありがとうございました。厚く御礼申し上げます。最後に今一度関係者の皆様にのご努力にですね、感謝を申し上げて、本日のこの特別な進歩を閉会としたいと思います。誠にありがとうございました。
木原先生、ありがとうございました。改めまして、ファウラー先生、ファウラー博士、世界食糧賞受賞おめでとうございます。本日は本当にお忙しい中、来ていただきます。どうもありがとうございます。それでは、これをもちまして、本日のキャリー・ファウラー博士特別シンポジウムを終了いたします。 皆様ご参加いただき誠にありがとうございました。会場にお越しの方はお帰りの際、レシーバーを必ずご返却ください。また、お配りいたしましたアンケートをスタッフにお渡しいただけますようにご協力お願いいたします。オンライン参加の皆様は画面よりご回答の協力をお願いいたします。なお、この後エントランスホールにて、ささやかなレセプションを用意しております。お時間のある方はぜひご参加いただきたくご案内申し上げます。本日は2024年世界食糧賞受賞者、キャリー・ファウラー博士特別シンポジウムにご参加いただきまして、誠にありがとうございました。